do this.
All right.
Good morning, Lisa. How are you?
Good morning. Good.
Yeah, I'm loving, I know I said it before, but I am loving this flowery vibe you've got going today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, sitting right in front of my porch doors with the screen doors, the big doors open, and so birds and trees, like just feet from my eyes.
I love it.
So I like to be in the forest as much as I can. So my little tree house here.
I love it. That's right, because you have stories. Yeah. Yeah, I'm in my equivalent. This is our
Mm,
3-season porch, so it's echoey because there's no soft stuff in it.
yeah.
But I have green in front of me and I can see the birds moving. So it's great.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So I'm wondering if you had any particular topic you wanted to talk about this morning.
Ah, well, I do have a theme that is really alive for me in general these days, and
Yeah,
I know it's relatable to your work too. And I'm also curious if you had anything.
I do, but let's see what you've got because I bet I can work it in.
Well, yeah, and I'm curious of yours because I'm familiar with mine. I'm definitely not bored with mine, but I'm definitely curious of what I don't know of your interest because
Got it.
so my theme is denialism.
Say that again.
Denialism.
Denialism. So at
Denialism.
first I thought you said nihilism, but
Well,
you
it
were
is
saying,
actually very linked.
well, tell me more.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about it in terms of it could be labeled different things, like a willful ignorance can be labeled as a refusal to look at something, like a flat out, like that doesn't exist. It can
Mhm.
be really innocent, like I don't know that I'm denying something because I don't know it exists or I'm not aware. It's not in my field of that it could be real. And I'm sure there's many other gradations of denialism. And I'm thinking of that in terms of mainly what, my passion in general is like what keeps us in separation, as
Right.
individually and community and culturally, like what keeps us in separation, which in my experience, when we're in separation, we're in suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, yeah, and I can see how it would be related to the work that you do with folks. Like I've come in to see you for sure and probably had some ideas of what was going on. And I don't know if it was active denialism, but it probably at times like, no, it's not that, it's this, and like really being convinced that like, no, I know my body and it's not, this is what's happening. And
Interesting.
being willing to come in, we talk about beginner's mind and being willing to come in and just discover without those ideas or agendas or defenses. Really, those are just defenses, innocent defenses
Right.
perhaps, that will limit my experience when I'm with you. So I don't know if that's like how you might see denialism. There might be lots of ways you see denialism in your practice.
Um, there are lots of ways, and actually, as I suspected, what you're saying dovetails nicely with what I've been thinking about lately. Yeah, it's all the same habits and possibilities, habits and possibilities.
It's and possibilities. Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yes. I can
but
feel
what, yeah, but what I've been, so I'm always reading, and one of the things I've been reading and thinking about lately is grief.
it.
Grief, and in some of the scientific work on grief, there's of course observational studies in animals, and
Mm-hmm.
our closest genetic animal is the chimp, the
Uh-huh.
chimpanzee. And chimpanzee mothers, when they lose an infant, grieve. But
Mhm.
part of that grieving involves carrying around the dead infant for a while
Yes.
and acting as if it's still alive. right? Still,
Sea mammals do this as well. Some
right.
sea mammals do.
And so it brings up interesting issues about denialism because, one, I think what you're saying is true. I think the real denialism, if we're talking about grief, would be people who say you need to let go. No, there's a biological and neurological need.
Yeah.
It happens for a reason that we take time to adjust.
Right. Yeah.
And in chimps, it looks like carrying around the dead infant. And the other chimps will actually support the mother and help groom her while she's neglecting herself until she's ready to lay down the infant and walk away. So
Right.
it's interesting because, someone looking at a human grieving might say, she just has to face up to facts. She's living in denial.
Wow. Right. Oh.
And this happens with pain too, right? Like we often want to take away our security blankets. Like someone who's experienced complicated, protracted back pain has in fact built up neurological systems that support that back pain. And also ways of alleviating that back pain, like, well, when I stretch and pop like this, then it helps me feel better.
Yeah.
And so if I, as a practitioner, go in saying, well, I know the stretching and popping isn't what's helping you, stop doing that, I'm actually taking away something very important.
Yeah.
And it's not so. So it's interesting that you bring up denialism because, again, we want to tell people to face facts, but often the question is, what is the real denialism here?
Yeah, right.
So I'm curious how that plays out in your world.
Wow. I mean, there's just like so many things going through my system right now. I'm thinking of somebody was sharing a story with me of going to see a therapist, and I think they did like DBT or something, and they basically through that they kind of took the person's old coping mechanisms away.
Right.
But they didn't replace it with anything somatic. Right. So there was just like, here, we're going to take your thought strategies away, but we're not going to give your attention a new place to live in your existence. And so then it leads to more anxiety. Like we need our coping strategies. Like we need our stories and our coping strategies and some of what we might call our dysfunctions until we don't. Right. So when someone comes to me for addiction or compulsions, which we could just say are habits that cause some health, some kind of challenge. We don't just look at like getting rid of that substance or that action. We obviously treat it holistically. I'll use that word holistically, but we look at the whole scene. What is it actually giving you to have that compulsion? What has it allowed you to do in your life? And what is it now limiting you in your life? And what can we find that might be more suited to your current day existence?
Right.
So it's a whole process. You don't just strip something away from somebody. That would be violent, right?
It would be violent.
It is violent, yeah.
And it plays out in the body. A really easy way to understand this is that phantom limb pain. Okay, so we all know that people who lose a limb often experience phantom limb pain, and that's because the brain hasn't figured out that the limb's not there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take this a bit further and talk about head transplants. Believe it or not, some crazy people have gone so far as to do that in animals.
Oh, okay.
And it's nuts. But it literally drives the animal nuts. And as you can imagine, so much of our self depends on the feedback we get from our very specific body.
Yeah, because they're in relationship.
And if you suddenly have a whole new body, you're going to overload the system. Your sense of self cannot catch up fast enough, and you basically fry.
Yeah.
you fried.
Orientation is gone.
Exactly.
That's so
and,
horrible.
and to take away, I mean, obviously, if one of my kids' habits was knife throwing at themselves, you know,
Yeah.
I
We want
think,
we want to find something to get through that very quickly, right?
very quickly. But in the meantime, we've got to move through successive approximations.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and connect to all the pieces, right? So back to somebody grieving, right? There's a lot happening there. There's just a lot of moving parts, right?
And if you skip too fast, you lose the connection.
Right, and that's the actual denial, right?
There you go.
Denial. So if you skip the parts, then you're denying the parts, and culture is not so interested in all these micro and macro relationships. Culture just is really interested in appearances. Appearances is also related to denialism in our culture. So
tell me more about this.
Well, we have a culture that really rewards people for looking a certain way. We hierarchize. I don't know if that's a word, but at the top of the ladder is we know cisgendered white folks.
Yeah.
And then and males, and then females, and so forth. Able-bodied, right? Yeah. Able-bodied, well-educated, Abrahamic, traditionally raised. I don't know if I said upper class already, but all those things that are the appearance of all those things, we hierarchize that, right? And so once someone starts deviating from the heteronormative, white, able-bodied normative, then we have moved into other appearances, right? So but then there's a denialism going on that there's a denialism that there is deviation. There's a denialism that we need to consider other people. There's a denialism that we are excluding other. I mean, it's so rich with denialism, but there's a denialism that we're treating people differently. There's a denialism that we're causing harm when we lack diversity in our organizations, or when we are not educated, historically speaking, about the exclusion of certain people. So
this is really interesting. I wonder if you'd be open to exploring this thought that you've provoked in me, that yes, we can be cognitive and be denying all these things, and really the denial was in the building of the structure, and then we have the habit. Because I do have people come in who unconsciously ignore certain parts of their body that then become stuck, and they're stuck in certain ways. And it's not that they're actively ignoring it. They're not denying that body part. It's just that something happened and that fell out of their awareness for some reason.
Right, probably for a good reason.
Probably for a good reason, or maybe not. Sometimes these things are just
didn't know.
Mom always changed your diaper on a certain way and turned your head that way, so you always turn your head that way. Whatever.
Sure, absolutely.
So what does that bring up for you? No, in your thinking, because like, what if we thought of hierarchy?
We hierarchize. So attention is going to hierarchize certain things. I still don't know if hierarchize is a word, but it's fun. So we do hierarchy. Attention does hierarchy appearances. It puts, the habit is to orient outward and to judge or orient my safety depending on the appearances around me and what I'm familiar with. Right. So, and this very quickly we can see the how implicit bias is a very big part of say, violence. So if I've grown up in an only white area and I'm seeing on the TV people of color being murderers and doing harm, and I learn an implicit bias that people of color are dangerous, and I'm a police officer and I go into an area where there's people of color, well, we know this scientifically, studies have been done, I'm going to draw my gun very quickly for a person of color versus a white person because I have an implicit bias. Right. So that's a habit of orientation. It's a habit of my attention to go to appearances and then act accordingly. That's an overt example, but then there's a million examples of what I'm not including in that. Right. And so if we want to move it more to the micro of like, because you and I work in the micro, I mean, we work in the macro world, but we are also like studying the micro with our clients, is if I'm raised in such a way to always orient through my head and through thought strategies, which is most of us on this planet, I'm going to be excluding most of my reality from the chin down. And therefore I'm going to be denying and not including the field of gravity, the sense of safety that my nervous system can receive from slowing down in this moment, and on and on and on and on and on we go, right? So my attention might orient to danger, to appearances, to superficial, well, they are superficial, but they're important they're still important, but they're also superficial because they're not connecting to the present, they're connecting to ideas.
Exactly.
So there's just a lot here. I think in your work and in my work, we're really going slow to be like, okay, what is it like to include feet on the ground in this moment? And of course, I'm doing that in this moment, right? So it automatically brings my attention down. I'm now anchored more. I can feel the weight of my body. My back starts to open up. Sounds become even more interesting.
Exactly.
I've even, so the whole reality switches when I include what maybe I had not been including for whatever reason.
Yeah. And we do. So I want to show you a book. I don't know if you've read it, but I got this book recommendation from another teacher called Tiffany Sankari, but it was in the news section at the library. So when I walked by, I said, oh, I must read it. So I don't know if you can see, but it's called Pause, Rest, Be, and it's by Octavia F. Rahim.
Yes, I have her other book. She's amazing.
Fantastic. And she asks the question, and I'm paraphrasing, what is your fear not saying? In other words, what is your fear ignoring, not including, that you know to be true, which you've described here so beautifully by talking about, well, my feet are on the ground, I hear the birds, and that's just one.
Can you see that question again, like that paraphrase question?
Yeah, so let me see if I can even find it. I'm going to read it aloud to you.
Oh, beautiful, thank you.
Listen for what isn't being spoken. You know how fear likes to talk a lot of outrageous smack. What if you got curious about what fear isn't saying? What is fear leaving out of the story that you know is true?
Yeah, I hear those words and I feel like a tingliness through my body, a little bit of just like a little increased, like all the neurology is like curious and listening and more available. Like, ooh, I don't have any answers. I just have questions, and that the question is just waking my system up. Like, ooh, we don't know, but I like the question.
Yeah, and it's an important one in my work, because a lot of people think they're feeling pain on the table because they've been in pain for so long.
Yep.
But what they're really feeling is that sense of, this is really different and I don't feel safe because it's so unfamiliar. And so we don't push into that, but that is what interests me here is the question of discerning between unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and actually dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about this before because it's so important. It's such at the heart of like a lot of the work I do.
Yeah.
Because as survivors, we are not going to want to walk into danger, right? Like who's going to want to do that? But we do conflate danger and discomfort a lot.
And if I grew up in a J. Crew catalog and suddenly I'm in the middle of a neighborhood where there are no J. Crew models and everyone looks different and it's everything a TV show has told me is dangerous, I will feel very uncomfortable.
Yes,
but is it
absolutely.
but is my fear justified?
Right. Yeah, and I think this is really, really important with regards to the topic of denialism.
That's why, yes.
Right. I was with a friend last night and they said, gosh, vulnerability is so hard for us humans. And so to be willing to ask questions, to be willing to be like, oh, how am I accidentally causing harm? What do I just not know? Not because I'm a bad person, but what am I at the top of the hierarchy? What do I accidentally deny the existence of? How is my languaging harmful to people who aren't in the same demographic as I am? I was with someone over the weekend and we were talking about non-binariness and she literally like couldn't. She just literally did that like, and it was a little startling because I'm not used to being in those environments anymore.
Yeah.
And but I just watched her be so uncomfortable with not knowing about something that she just denied its existence. Literally just basically denied its existence.
Or the time that I shocked myself. I've worked with a lot of sick people and a lot of people in pain, from my nursing background. And when it shocked me that in a non-medical, I was not a provider in this scene, I was a spectator, but someone was telling a story about their own childhood medical trauma. And I literally could not look them in the eyes. I had to turn away. And it was a type of denialism, maybe, right? But it wasn't a rejection of the person. It was a rejection of the pain of what that all brought back for me. And so sometimes I wonder if some people who look prejudiced or biased, who knows what their experience was. And I'm not saying this was for your person, but who knows if they had to deny their own identity.
Well, that's it. That's the thing. We're raised in this culture to deny.
Yeah.
So we are denying constantly, and if we have built a fortress, or it's not going to feel safe to question what we've had to deny.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I also read about body language, which is kind of hokum in some ways. And I bring this up because we are taught to be very thinking, and we're not taught to be feeling. We're not taught to focus on our body, but it's such a resource. We can identify so many things by touch. We get so much information. And it's all, we're not optimizing our senses.
No.
And these are things that can allow us to read a situation better. Because when you look at pictures of people interacting in other cultures, if I look from the lens of a feeling place, I can sense, oh, are these people softening towards each other? Are they turning towards each other? And not that I know what people are thinking or what's going on, but there are some very definite cues that happen below the level of our consciousness that have to do with literally how the body is feeling. So I can begin to feel how another body is feeling. I
Yeah.
can't know why it's feeling that way.
Right. Well, and then to ask questions or to share, right? To ask
Right.
various questions like, oh, yeah, tell me more. Or even like, of course, I don't know the context that you are in, but to be able to say like, oh, I'm really remembering something for a moment, and I'm here, I'm listening, I'm also like digesting, and
Yeah.
this is a lot in me, a lot that's coming alive in this conversation right now, and can we go slow, right?
And that's another thing we're not taught. We deny ourselves the permission to stop and feel.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what you describe is very higher order, realizing that we need the time to feel and then verbalizing it and thinking that it's okay for us to ask for time to feel. Because another way of saying what you said is, I think, I'm feeling a lot right now and I need some time to feel.
Yes.
Please give me some time and I will then be able to engage with you this way more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I always, that's one of the first things I introduce to couples when I work with couples, is to develop that language, to be able to pause and let the partner know, like, ooh, I'm feeling the feels. I just need a moment to kind of digest. I'm not going anywhere. I've not left you. I'm still in.
Yeah.
But I need to slow down, and then the other person to honor that and to acknowledge that, and then to come back, but to just name it out loud instead of just shutting down, right?
Yeah.
Or leaving.
Yeah.
Like, or even, and that's obviously not just for romantic partners, that's for friends, that's for siblings, that's for children, that's for self. Like, oh, I'm feeling the feels right now. Let me just hold on a moment and reorient. And that's a great thing to do, and lots of contexts, right?
Hold that baby so you can let go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because it comes up a lot amongst my peers. In other words, so I do a lot of interviews with fellow neuromovement teachers.
Right, I love those interviews.
Oh, thanks. I enjoyed my interview with you too. And a lot of those teachers have had amazing lives filled with all the highs, all the lows. And yet we've been trained to present our very public face. So sometimes in telling their story, it's a lot and they get emotional.
Sure.
And I respect whatever they want to do, but the knee-jerk reaction is to hide it.
Sure. Yeah.
And of course I can do that. I'm not going to take anyone's word by approximation. And I'm very honored when people allow me to show even a smidgen of that, right? Because we all need to see, it's just like we need to see different people of different genders, different everything. Also, people having emotions.
Yes.
We don't see people having emotions.
Right. We don't, because we're so concerned about that certain normative appearance that's not even human. It's not even representative of being human. It's just this outward facing something.
Did you see that? So I'm curious, since we had access to the same resources here in town, if when you were getting ready to give birth, if you too saw that video where they show you the video of the woman giving birth, and then there's the uncut version at the end.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Oh, I found that in the context of denialism very interesting. And I realized that they might not have wanted to trigger some people, and hence the cuts in the first one. But the unfiltered version that they give you at the end with all the warnings was really pretty valuable. Right? So it's not this TV version of I get to scream because I'm upset and say whatever comes into my head. It was real. Yeah. It was completely real.
Yeah, we need permission to be real. We need so much permission to be real. Yeah, that's why I really do try to share my stories with my clients and write about my experiences with my clients so that they don't hierarchize me. They don't put me on a pedestal. They don't think that I am whatever they're going to make up in their mind. Like,
Yeah.
no, like, let me take myself off of that as quickly as possible, because you will at some point. When I don't live up to the construct that you've created of me,
Yeah.
then so let me just do it for you, and talk about how, when I have shame, like, let me just post it in our group. When I have sadness, fear, anger, like all this stuff, like, there's just no sacred cows for me at this point.
Yeah.
You know?
And what is the response to those posts then?
Well, it probably depends on the person. A lot of people in the spiritual world are used to pedestaling, and they really want to become a we as a species, we do have an interesting draw toward an appearing person who doesn't suffer, who is just like kind of always the same, kind of just this equilibrium. Like, we in the spiritual community, people pedestal those people as like just being like, that's what we think of as a perfect human.
Yeah.
They don't get upset. That's what I want. I don't want to be upset. I don't want to. Basically, the subtext is, I don't want to feel my. I don't want to feel my humanness. I just want to be this superhuman, who it's not even a superhuman. It's a non-existent human. For the spiritual world, like I can't think of the right word, but they market for that. They monopolize on that fantasy. They make a lot of money on selling that impossible dream.
Yeah.
So, and then in other contexts, so I disappoint people sometimes. They're like, "Oh, you're not what I wanted." I'm like, "No, I'm not, apparently." Or they're like, "Oh, so the people that have been displaying the side of themselves, like, that's what I'm trying to be. Ooh, and you are, huh?" So it's kind of it can be a journey around. First, you have to shed all those old ideas, you know. But then the other groups of people are like, "Oh, thank goodness, like, you too, yeah, me too, right? Us too, yeah, we're on this journey together. Like, there is no perfection, there is no arrival." And at first, that's really heartbreaking for certain people who've been sold that. But for other people, it's like, "Oh, thank goodness, like, I've been like torturing myself." Well, both people are torturing themselves, trying to get to something that doesn't exist. And so it can be really relieving to be like, "Oh, I'm going to feel all the feelings, but I don't have to suffer when I feel all the feelings, because I'm not denying them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't pretend that shame's
Right.
gone. I don't pretend that anger's gone, or fear is gone, or sadness is, or grief is." Like, no, I get to welcome them all in. And so then I'm not resisting, I'm allowing. So where's the suffering in that?
Yeah. Yeah. If you take the baby away too soon, the monkey never really
Hmm.
reorients to their new reality.
I mean, grief is it's a great one, because over and over I hear that story from people. Everyone's telling me I should be done grieving. So I always tell the stories of my life, when I miscarried,
Yeah.
I had an unexpected deep wave of grief that came probably 2 years after that. And it took that long
Yeah.
and my dad has died now. It's about 6 years. And that was its own journey for a few years. And does grief ever end? Well, I'm not sure, but it's different. It becomes different.
It becomes different.
So allowing people to not have to get over it in
Right.
a month, like, come on. What?
No.
It's very
And
permissive.
yeah, and that's, I I would love to show you another book. And this is
Oh, wow.
The Grieving Brain by Mary Frances O'Connor. And what I love most about this book is that it contextualizes grieving as a process of learning, right? When is learning ever over. I mean, at some point
Right.
you
Oh,
have certain
gosh.
skills, and she goes through the neurobiology and the psychology. And what I love about it is that it's habits and possibilities.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Habits and possibilities. And something you said really resonated. What I love about your post is that you're sharing your process.
Yep.
Right? It's not about the particulars, although they are what form the story, but what you're sharing is your process. You're not showing people a sterilized portfolio of Lisa happy, Lisa excited, Lisa discovering, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
everything in between and the how, because
Yes.
people will learn nothing from a portfolio.
No, they won't.
You can't look at little
More
happy cards.
appearances. More
Say
appearances.
that again?
More appearances.
More appearances. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody texted me. I think we have enough time. Somebody texted me yesterday, a beautiful person in one of my communities of practice, and they said, "Can you remind me that that this is a learning planet?" So I said, "Oh, absolutely." I don't remember exactly, but something like, "This is a learning planet. We are here. We are here to learn. We are here to discover. We are here to learn some more."
Yeah.
And then they shared that shame was arising.
Yeah.
When we forget this is a learning planet, we'll think it's a perfection planet, and then we'll have shame for not being perfect. So then we, I messaged them back and I said, "Oh yes, like shame, I'm here for you, with you. You're welcome here too." I can't remember exactly what I said, but yes, like you get to be here too in this learning planet. And then they responded like that, just turned everything around, right? Because shame in our culture is, we have shame of shame.
We do.
We have fear of shame. We have shame we've been isolated because of shame. We've been shamed by certain people in our life, and by the culture that propagates perfectionism and the normativeness. And so can be a really debilitating experience when it's done in isolation, right? And shame, it breeds in isolation and in darkness, right? So it's counterintuitive because we have this experience and it's kind of like, oh, this is so awful, I can't tell anyone, I've got to hide. And that actually is what feeds the shame, right? So when I had a shame spiral come up a couple months ago, one of the first things I did after I kind of was, sitting with it, is I went to my community of practice, my class, my course that I teach, my exploration, and we have a group, a Slack group, where we share practices all day. And I went right into that, and I shared that I was having a shame spiral. I put it into a particular practice that I teach my students. And there it was, out of into the light. Right. And so it immediately disrupted the power that shame would have in darkness. And I knew that. I knew what I had to do. I didn't want to do that. I was like, ooh, what are they going to say? What are they going to, and it's like, fuck that. Excuse my language. Like, this is what I'm here for to do. Like, I'm not here to propagate some fantasies of humanity. I'm here to be human with my folks and be human together. And in doing so, like, that was the most compassionate and kind thing I could have done to myself, because it disrupted the breeding ground.
Yeah.
I don't know where we started with this, but anyway.
It's a great place to close, because Octavia Rahim talks about how she has to be honest with her people if she's journeyed where she's leading them or not. And if she hasn't, she can still be a guide in a way. The way she puts it is, she can set up base camp while her student ascends the mountain, knowing that she's there, the fire's lit, the food is cooking, she's waiting for them.
That's right, it's here.
Yeah, so your community of practice sounds like a place where you journey together and support each other, sometimes waiting at base camp.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. We just have to have that. We have to have that in a culture of denialism. We have to have that to disrupt the culture of denialism.
There you go.
Have honesty and
Wonderful.
transparency. The crows agree.
The crows agree.
They are very much agreeing with this assessment.
I love it. A beautiful ending to, again, a beautiful, interesting, exhilarating conversation. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to start my day with you this morning. Always love to see you, be with you.
Thank you for sharing your presence with me.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Bye. Take care.